Relationships could be complicated in ways that one cannot imagine. There are moments when you are ready to kill for your better half, and then there are moments where you want to kill your better half. Almost everyone, at some point, have thought of killing somebody. But it is another thing to think about it, and completely different thing to actually do that and go on and kill. The curious case of Courtney Cleaning is somewhat of a case that is incredibly terrifying. Not because there are monstrosities or barbaric or anything supernatural about it, but because it is real and could happen to anyone at any given point in life, especially when you are in relationship and the relationship is taking a toxic toll upon your life. Then there are certain moments that will lead you to take irrational steps that are damaging in many ways, and in so many ways can prove themselves to be fatally harmful for people on both sides. In the video, you are seeing a young OnlyFans model, Courtney Cleaning. She is a young model who have been developing a name on this site, OnlyFans, and putting herself out there and making a good living for herself. Now, if you are someone who gets paid in a lot of money for your single photograph, there is a rare chance that someone in a relationship with a higher paying girl would get insecure and with the OnlyFans thing in her being intimate in front of all of these men who are paying to get her sexual photographs. Now there is something that would piss off a lot of men. So here in the video, Courtney Cleaning is drenched in blood and sitting beside the body of her boyfriend ominously, which seems to not be moving. From this shaky video that the neighbor have seemed to film, we can see Courtney in her lingerie, confused and devastated and in blood. At this point, no one knows the events that led up to this massacre, but it is something to speculate upon. On Sunday, April 3rd, in a small shaky video and OnlyFans, model Courtney Cleaning has been sitting and soaked in blood. That was of Christian Toby, a Bumsley. Nobody knows what happened in that room before. Nobody but Courtney. Their relationship had been that of more than 2 years. And the people who were witness to their relationship consider it to be a toxic relationship. And it was something that everyone warned them about. Imagine being a 25-year-old model, making a lot of money from OnlyFans. But there are a lot of theories of how things must have gone by that evening, and a lot of speculations and facts about the case. But the truth only remains intact with two people. One of them is a Bumsley who is very dead right now. And the other one is Courtney, and you never know how much of the truth she will disclose. Well, here is our version how things might have gone. One fine day when the tensions were high, Bumsley must have come back to the apartment, asking for Courtney, and asking her what her plans with the life was. If OnlyFans was the only thing that she would ever ambition her about a man. Insecure about her girlfriend is not something new, especially when her girlfriend is getting paid to be pretty, lewd in front of strangers that nobody knows. Are you always going to do? Get photographs, must have said Obama, slate. To which she just shrugged her shoulders, too, and went on to doing the photograph for OnlyFans. And then he must have said, Do not ignore me when I am talking to you. Knowing that the relationship was toxic, these fights must have been frequent and normal. But this time, something was definitely different. As he said, "Look at me when I am talking to you," he shouted, as he grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her away. And enraged, Obviously must have had enough, and his violent senses taking over, he must have charged over it, Courtney, and punched her. As he did that, Courtney tried to get away from him, but he was wild and like an angry werewolf. Charged at her, and as she ran to the kitchen countertop, she grabbed the knife, and as he was attacking her, she tried ducking away, and as she did in her self-defense, the knife pierced its way to his chest, and in return, obviously getting stabbed in the chest. Distraught, Courtney tried reviving him. Knowing that she was not able to, she called in the 911, and as she sat beside obviously, drenched in blood and waiting for the police to arrive, she was both in shock and in sorrow. Even if the relationship was toxic, there would really be drastic and act in something of murder. Then there's the version where Bumsley was the innocent guy, and Courtney murdered out for blood. Here, what might have happened? Upon further looking into the matter of Courtney and OnlyFans, he might have stumbled through the affair, or affairs she might have been having. He must have come in to confront her. "Are you having an affair?" you must have asked. And then, upon not getting any answer, he continued, "Just let me know the truth. I don't want to be played with." And then, she must have continued to do what she was doing. And as she did, obviously confronted her with evidence and said, "These are all the men that you are having an affair with." He continued in rage, "Answer me. What is wrong with you? Just tell me." And as he asked her and questioned her, she came in with rage with all those questions and said, "I am having an affair, and they pay well, unlike you." And as she did, she turned into this fierce psycho lady and charged him with a knife and stabbed him in the chest. And as she did, she saw the blood oozing and applied it to her body, sat around, took a rest, and started crying. And then called the police. Now the truth can be anything but. At this point, with no information, we can just assume Courtney walked free out of the court, on the basis that she acted in self-defense. Was it self-defense? That can only be uncovered by Courtney and Bumsley. So his word is something that we definitely cannot seem to get. What is more concerning is, if the tables were turned, and it was Bumsley who acted in self-defense, would he have walked free? When I was about 8, my mother left my father. And then about 2 years later, he did get married to a woman he met in a bar. Now I know one thing for sure. You do not try and find a life partner in a bar. The marriage happened briefly. I remember it was Vegas where they got married. I remember they left me with a neighbor. I still think Gloria was much nicer to me before my father got married. But when he did get back, I saw my neighbor. Gloria just changed her behavior and never met me again. But as the new stepmother came in, the things got easier in the beginning. But sooner it turned into ignored nudges. And then things got violent. And soon it started becoming regular. And then she would occasionally push me. But at times it seemed harmless. Time went on by, but it seemed like things were good. And then years in, they started fighting. And then things got out of hands, as I would see them almost being separated. And it felt really weird to live in the house with them. At that moment, I would walk in on stepmom, crying all the time and drinking. And my father would stay away for days. I was 12, and their marriage was looking like it was going nowhere, and I was in the middle of it, ignored. Eventually, things got way out of hand. My stepmom one day got up while crying, came to my room and started beating me endlessly, and said that if I can lay hands on my father, she would definitely go crazy on me. She would beat me, and then later on, my father would come in and then see that I've been beaten, and then go on and beat stepmother. I would cry endlessly and try to seek help from Gloria. But she just wouldn't care. Until the day she opened the door, as she heard gunshot noises coming out from my household. And as she did, I entered, holding my stomach with blood coming out of it. My stepmom chased as Gloria did close the door, and we stepped away from it, thankfully out of the 6 bullets that she shot at me. One hit me and all the rest missed. Gloria called in the 911, and the police came and took my stepmother away. And upon my complaint, my father too was arrested. They were giving me to the foster care when Gloria stepped in and became my legal guardian, helping me out in the time. Neither my father nor my stepmother were there. Rather, it was my neighbor Gloria being there for me. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. I had an exceptionally upsetting incident on my 3rd job house sitting. To help you understand why it affected me so much, I should probably tell you about myself. I grew up in a single-parent home. My mom has always been a loving and understanding parent, but I think she felt pressure to find a new husband. My dad left us as soon after I was born. She began dating almost immediately. This pressure caused her to make a lot of bad choices. She did the bar scene, constantly bringing home a new man. A few would stay, but not for long. She never seemed to understand that. You don't find a husband in a place like that. Every relationship inevitably broke down into arguments and fighting. And on more than one occasion, the fights got physical on both sides. My mom's love of wine did a lot when flame tensions. And because of this constant state of chaos, have became a people pleaser and hated confrontation. It's the big reason behind my panic attacks. I've worked a lot on my assertiveness, but I sometimes fall back into my old habits. My story starts in 2015. I was bouncing from job. I've been having a hard time finding something in my degree field. A friend had recently become a house sitter and made it sound fun. She made it sound like a permanent vacation, and I desperately needed one of those. She gave me a quick course on the ins, announced the job, and helped me land my first client. I was a ball of nerves, but I got through it. The second client went much smoother. It would be the third. That would make me think twice about doing this. Long term. It was now mid-2016. I answered an ad, asking for someone to sit a house a few hours away. And this would be my first long-distance gig, and I didn't want to mess it up. I made a list of questions and showed them to my friend. She suggested a few changes, and I called the number. The homeowner, and I made an appointment for me to view the property. I quickly made arrangements and drove up to meet him. He was a businessman, needing to leave town on short notice. My job would be to accept packages and mail, but most importantly, look after his dog. Dog's name was Bart. He was the Saint Bernard mix, and when we first met, he didn't appear very interested in anything. He sniffed me once and returned to his bed. And all seemed simple enough. I asked a few questions, and at the end of the appointment, we both decided that I'd be perfect for the job. I checked into my hotel for the night, and returned the following morning. My stay would be for 3 full nights. I was looking forward to relaxing, and maybe even playing with Bart. That afternoon I tried to do just that. Mart wasn't interested though. Instead, we lounged together on the patio. It was a beautiful sunny day. The slow, cool breeze in the shade made it feel like paradise. The home's slightly remote location allowed for a wonderfully peaceful environment. I felt calmer than I had in a very long time. Bart and I took a brief nap before going back inside for dinner. I ordered a pizza and cheesy bread. Afterwards, I opened a pint of ice cream I bought for such an occasion, and parked my butt in front of the television. Bart was proving to be just as easy to handle as I'd hoped. He joined me on the couch, and we watched a movie on Netflix. We completed a little less than half of it before the doorbell began ringing. This wasn't your normal ring, however. The person was pushing the button over and over again. It was now well after 5 p.m. and I wasn't aware of anyone visiting that late. I did briefly consider not answering it, but the incessant ringing made me think, someone may need help. The woman I encountered on the opposite side of the door had very aggressive body language. I didn't say one word before she tore into me. She demanded to speak to the homeowner. I told her he was out of town on business. It didn't seem wise to let her know when he was to return. She didn't appear to believe me. As she spoke, she grew louder and became visibly angrier. I could feel myself getting increasingly nervous, and I did all I could to convince her. Then she began cursing at me, calling me all these things, and terrible words I'd rather not repeat here. She convinced herself that I was the homeowner's new girlfriend. I hadn't noticed until just then, but Bart had walked up behind me. As it became more enraged, he grew more aggressive. The scene quickly became a cacophony of yelling and barking. I could feel a panic attack was on the way. I was completely overwhelmed by all of that. Bart's booming bark echoed through the hallway. It looked like he would attack her at any moment, and things would only get worse from here. I'm not sure what I said, but it set the woman off, and she lunged at me, or reacted by lunging at her. By some miracle, I was able to get the door closed before anyone was hurt. After that, Bart calmed down a bit. He backed away a few feet and sat down. But his eyes stayed blue to the door. I slid down the door and commenced a suffering. One of the worst panic attacks I've ever experienced. The woman continued screaming and pounding on the door. And I was sure that I was dying. To his credit, Bart stayed where he was and did nothing. And minutes passed, and I was able to get enough control of myself to call the police. The operator did a fantastic job of talking me down. The police arrived, and I made it clear that she attempted to assault me. The officers were understanding and took the woman away with them. I'm not sure if he was formally arrested, however. I was still very shaken. I was a heartbeat away from running back home. Then any matter, I had to notify the homeowner of what had happened. It was extremely apologetic and begged me not to leave. But against my better judgment, I agreed to stay. Like I said, I tend toward being a people pleaser. Admittedly, leaving Bart alone after he tried to protect me would have been cruel. We finally agreed that my fee would be doubled. It did feel like extortion, and I knew it may affect my reputation. But I'd already decided this would be my last sitting job, so I accepted. I need all the money I could get, until I found a new job anyway. The next 2 nights were calm and quiet. Bart stayed by my side the entire time. It made leaving that much harder. The homeowner and I had a brief conversation the morning he returned. He was still very apologetic and explained what may have caused a situation in. The crazy woman had been dating, but he ended it because of her suspicious and control and behavior. I didn't inquire any further. I got the impression he was very embarrassed by her. I'd already been paid, so nothing was keeping me around any longer. Except for Bart. I bent down and gave my hero a big hug and kiss on the nose. I could already feel the tears welling up. I didn't want to make a scene in myself, so I said goodbye and jogged away to my car. That was the worst, and the last of my brief career in house sitting. And I miss it for a second and ask for Bart. That's a completely different story. After about a year of using the dating app Hinge, I pretty much worked through every girl on there. I'm not saying I had much success, but since my preferences were kind of narrow, there weren't all that many potential matches for me. I check Hinge every so often to see if there were any new faces, but the vast majority were girls I'd seen before. Having deleted their accounts before making new ones, and any actual new faces just didn't seem to do it for me. That's when Coraline appeared in my Discover section. Her name wasn't actually Coraline, but since the story does get kind of personal, I'm gonna change some names to protect the innocent. Every so often I'd see a girl on Hinge. That had provoked an audible wow from me. Coraline, or Coral for short, was one of them. At the risk of sounding a little ignorant, when I first saw her, I thought she might be like half Asian or something. But it turned out that she had some indigenous Mexican blood in her, and her grandma was from the native Nawa tribe. The point was, she had this unusual, but undeniably attractive, look about her, and with her deep dive shoulder-length hair. I found myself instantly captivated. But as I scrolled down, I saw one of her prompts said, "You should know, I was in a car accident, and I have some neurological disabilities, and scarring as a result." That kind of came out of left field for me, and I found myself confronted with what I suppose is my own bias. I was so game to ask this girl out, but I honestly hesitated when I read the thing about her disabilities. And I mean, why? She's gorgeous, smart, obviously super active, if half her pictures are in climbing and workout gear. And from what I could tell, the fact that she continued to date after an accident like that made her extremely brave from where I'm standing. I'm honestly not sure I'd have the same kind of balls to bounce back after something that nearly killed me. That was what swung it, that and the idea that passing on a girl I'd normally swoon over, just because she had some deformities. I think that's a bit of a jerk move on, mind, I'm sure you'll agree. So I sent her a message. And I did what I usually do and just hope for the best. After a few days later, we match. And the fact that I was so elated about it told me how much it actually mattered to me. That she had some differences. I was excited to talk to a charismatic, brave and beautiful young woman whose attitude towards her own adversity was frankly inspiring for me. At first we talked about literature and traveling, and by the time she used the word petrichor in a sentence. Petrichor is the earthly scent produced when rain falls on dry soil. I was practically throwing my phone number at her. And luckily for me, she was actually keen on continuing the conversation. Texting and voice notes soon progressed to organizing a first date. We met for coffee and donuts one rainy afternoon, fixing all of the world's problems over the course of, like a 3-hour conversation. I didn't even try to broach the subject of her accident. I figured that she talked about it if or when she was ready. But as she said, she had this policy of fail fast. And if I couldn't deal with her disabilities, there was no point pursuing anything. She showed me some of the scarring in her hairline, and some of the scarring on her shoulder too. The accident had left her unable to lift her left arm above her shoulder height. But perhaps the thing that had the biggest impact on her life was the night terrors. Coral mentioned how she gotten her panic attacks under control with therapy and medication. But that residual fear seemed to have just confided itself to the nighttime. She said it was one of the biggest things that held her back from getting back to dating after the accident, and she'd often worried she'd have an attack of night terrors after being intimate with somebody. I'll be honest, I kind of worried about that too. Not so much because it would freak me out. I totally get why she had nightmares after a major car accident, which she was terrified of embarrassing herself, as she put it. So I did something entirely against my instincts and waited like 2 months to try and seal the deal, so to speak. I waited until I was entirely sure she was comfortable around me, sleeping in the same bed and all that stuff, and only then did I invite her back to my place to make the next move. I promise I won't go into any unnecessary detail. But it was wonderful. And even with the scarring she hated so much, she was beautiful. And as we fell asleep in each other's arms, I started to wonder What was I so worried about in the first place? I wake up in the middle of the night, roll over to check my phone, and it's about 3 o'clock a.m. It's perfectly quiet, so Coral hasn't had night terrors or whatever. So my first thought is like, she's comfy asleep, awesome. I roll back to try and spoon Coral, little one. Find that there's no one there. I figured she's just in the bathroom or whatever. I have an insuite. But there's no lights on, and no noise coming from it. I checked the floor next to the side of the bed, where she stole some of her clothes and they're gone. And only then in my half-sleep, half-drunk and stay, do I realize she's bailed while I was asleep. I mean, it hurt. I never had a girl get up and leave in the middle of the night like that, but before I even had time to process it, I heard the front door of my apartment rattling. So little side note, I live in this really terrible Brooklyn apartment at the time. One where the door wouldn't stay shut unless you actually locked it from the inside. So unlike other places where that kind of sound would indicate someone was outside wanting to get in, I realized that it might well be Coral, making noise as she's trying to get out. I didn't think she was having a night terror, or like some kind of episode. I have no idea what to make of anything, and I'm still half asleep and incredibly confused. So it was, with a fair amount of nerves and caution, that I edged around my bedroom and into the main hallway to see what was going on with that door. And just like I deduced, in the final moments before I left my bedroom, it was indeed Coral trying to get out of my apartment. Probably confused and scared as to why the door was locked. I was sure that I mentioned something about her and that my keys lived in a teeny little holder by the door that looked like a little cuckoo clock. He wouldn't know it could open unless someone tells you. But then again, coming back home, a little tipsy after our meal might have meant it slipped my mind entirely. Coral. Are you okay? I asked her. She just spun around to face me. And it was only then that I realized that she had a corkscrew in her hand. And she's holding it almost like a pair of brass knuckles, with the screw emerging from between her fingers. Who are you? She screams at me. Why is the door locked? Let me out of here before I call the cops. I realized right then that she was having some kind of episode. She had a night terror, forgotten where she was or something, and now she was freaking out. It was scary, sure, but at least I knew what was happening. And after having talked about it a little, I knew exactly what I had to do. Coraline, it's me. You came here after some food. We slept together. You're safe. I promise. I'm sorry about my door. I have to lock it like that. But you're free to leave if you want to. You need to calm down. But please. I tried to get it all out at once, while staying calm, enough to bring her down from the brink. Open the door before I kill you. Having anyone lunge at you with a corkscrew is intimidating. It really doesn't matter if they're 5'0", incredibly skinny, but have someone lunge at you with a corkscrew. When you're completely naked. That's real fear, let me tell you. Coraline. I started talking really, really slow. I can't open the door without the key. I need to get the key. That's when she approaches even further and pushes the sharp point of the corkscrew into my neck. Not hard enough to actually puncture my throat, but oh, my God. One smidge of force sworn I'd have been squirting blood. Like a Killed Bill henchman. There came a moment when I was sure she was about to plunge that piece of cold steel into my neck. She took this sharp inhale and kind of flexed her arm. I don't know, it's hard to describe. But I remember my heart just pounding in my chest. As I'm thinking, the next thing I'd be doing would be rushing to call 911. We're right as she seems like she's about to stab me with a freaking corkscrew. She relents. And I can see this look into her eyes as she sort of. And this is the best way I can describe it. Wakes up. She sees the corkscrew up my neck and just drops it. Recoiling like she was horrified, I wish she was doing. She looks me dead in the eye and stammers out, I'm sorry, And then our speech just degenerated into silent, gasping tears. My heart absolutely broke for her in that moment. The big thing she feared about getting back into dating. And it happened. And it was probably worse than either of us had imagined it would be. It was done by the time she calmed down, and as much as I insisted that she was free to leave, I wanted her to stay. I wanted to be supportive. I hated the idea of making her feel like I was mothering her. Whatever, but at the same time, I just wanted to protect her and help her so bad. Not the healthiest incarnation when it comes to relationships, but it is what it is, I suppose. I'd like to give you some kind of super happy ending here too, but my relationship with Coral didn't last. She just didn't feel like she was quite ready to date. Yet, and rushing it had made her feel worse than ever. That sucked to hear, it sucked hard. And as that dumb old cliche goes, if you love something, let it go. I still think about it from time to time. And I hope she's doing much better than she was. And Coral with, by some small possibility, you're reading this, and you recognize that this is about you. I love you and I forgive you.